Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to discuss about Rancher Portal. We will learn how to configure Rancher Portal in your Azure environment or Rancher Portal on a virtual machine right from the beginning. We will understand why do you need Rancher and in which scenario Rancher is going to be useful for your container management. Hi, my name is Rakesh Suryavanshi and you're watching Be a Learner. Before we begin the discussion, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. First of all, let's understand why Rancher. So why Rancher Portal or the Rancher is basically an open source platform which is available to manage your Kubernetes cluster configuration as well as the deployment which you have in your Kubernetes environment. So it gives you a user interface which you can use to manage the existing deployment, or you can onboard a new deployment to your Kubernetes cluster, or you can manage the configuration, logging, auditing, or any sort of other configuration which you may want to do for your Kubernetes cluster. And it's not only restricted to Azure Kubernetes, but if you have a Kubernetes cluster created in any cloud provider such as AWS, Google, Azure, or Cloudflare, then you have the options to onboard all those different platform Kubernetes clusters onto a single user interface without having dependency on the kubectl command line interface. So if you are not a big fan of command line interface, and if you're not new to the kubectl commands, then Rancher is something which you can start using to manage your Kubernetes deployment. In this video, we are going to configure the Rancher portal onto a new virtual machine, a virtual machine which is of type Linux, and the virtual machine we are going to create first of all from the beginning, and then we will go into this step-by-step detail. How do you configure the Rancher portal on that particular Linux machine? Let's begin with the demonstration. So this is my Azure environment wherein I am going to create a new virtual machine which is of type Ubuntu server. I'll take the latest Ubuntu option which is available, and I'm going to give it a configuration like Rancher VM, which is the name of my virtual machine. You can give it any name and choose the location and the default parameters as is. Let's go, and I'm going to quickly configure the VM parameter. Here I'm going to use the existing. It will create a new virtual network. That's okay. I'll leave all the parameters by default. So the creation of the virtual machine process started. It will take a moment to complete the virtual machine. So the VM is created, and now I can use this public IP address to connect to the virtual machine with the SSH command line, and I'll provide the username and then the IP address. I'll press yes, I would like to connect, and then simply I will provide the password which I have specified while creating a virtual machine. There we go. The virtual machine is successfully created. I'll just clear the terminal. I will connect as an root user, and now next step we need to perform is we need to install the Docker, because the way we want to configure the Rancher portal on this particular virtual machine, we want to use the Docker image or the Rancher Docker image on this particular virtual machine. So for that, first of all, we need to install the Docker. I'm going to check if the Docker is already available just for the verification. For this, I'm going to run docker ps command, and you can see that I'm getting the error docker command docker not found, which suggests that we do not have the Docker install on this particular virtual machine. Before I install the Docker, let's first of all upgrade or update this virtual machine with the help of apt-get space update -y command. So that will update the virtual machines and different packages. The upgrade is successfully completed. I will reboot the machine with the reboot command. So reboot is successfully completed. So that will restart the machine and that will take some amount of time to start again. I'll connect again, connect as a root user. And now this time we are going to run the apt install docker.io that will install the Docker on this particular virtual machine. Press yes. So the Docker is installed on this machine. So let me clear the terminal and then I'll verify the Docker command with the help of Docker PS. And this time you can see that I'm getting the outcome. At the moment, we do not have any images created on this Docker, but at least it is returning me the empty result. It's not complaining that the Docker is not installed or no command found, which we were getting it earlier. Now, next command which we are going to run is docker run -- privilege -d restart unless stop, and then we are going to expose a port 8443 on top of the 443, and this is the Rancher version which we are going to use, Rancher version v2.4.2. so Rancher VM with this particular version. If you want, you can use the latest version of the Rancher. You just need to make sure that the latest version of the Rancher is supported by the Docker version which you are using on your virtual machine. If that's the case, then you can use the latest version. If not, then you need to use the version which has been supported by the Docker which you have installed on the machine. With that, let's run this particular command. This should download the image and run the image on the Docker container. That's it. Let me clear the terminal one more time. And now I will run the docker ps command again just to validate the Docker image is running. And you can see that the Docker image with the specified version is running, created at 11 seconds ago. And it is exposed at this particular port number. So I can use the same IP address and then basically launch the Rancher portal. So I'll copy the IP address from the Azure portal and then try to launch the IP address with https:// IP address and then port 8443. So at the moment, I'm not able to launch the Docker Rancher portal on this machine. The reason for that could be the network security group which you might have on your virtual machine. That is something which might be blocking the connection, because when we created a virtual machine, we just exposed or allowed connection from port number 22. So we need to make sure that we are allowing a communication from the specified port. So let's see that if I add this particular inbound route, so that should allow the communication on the port number 8443. So Rancher image is up and running now. And as you can see, when I'm browsing it on this particular port, which is hosted on port 443, I'm getting this message, which is not secure. The reason for that, because we haven't uploaded any SSL certificate with that. For now, this demonstration, we can click on advanced and then proceed to this link that will launch the Rancher portal for the very first time. And we need to reset the password as it is launching for the very first time. So I'm going to reset my local password for this Rancher portal. I'll agree the terms and condition. Make sure you remember this particular password. And this is going to be the URL for the Rancher portal. And there you go. We have successfully launched the Rancher portal from our virtual machine with the Docker image of the Rancher. Currently, it is connected to the global configuration. You can onboard the AKS cluster or the Kubernetes cluster from the different cloud provider. I'll show you in a moment. So once you onboard it, you will find all those cluster details or the number of cluster which you have onboarded list here. And if you want to go to the apps which has been configured or deployed on the selected cluster, you can click here on the apps and you will be able to check the apps details here. You can change the settings of the Rancher portal itself right here from this particular section. If there are any securities, user groups related configuration, you can specify here. It has the tools configuration as well, which Rancher offers basically certain number of catalog applications from the Helm library, which you can use to deploy the application from the Helm library. If you click on the catalogs, for example, then that will show you that these are the number of catalogs which are basically running underneath the Rancher portal itself. Okay, now you can add a new catalog if you wish to, right here from this particular section. Okay, and let's say at the moment we are using the Rancher portal with the local username and password, but if you would like to configure the Azure AD or any cloud authentication, then you can configure those kind of authentication right here on this particular admin configuration. If you click here on the cloud credentials detail, you can add a new cloud credential, manage existing cloud credential. So for example, when I click here, it gives me what type of cloud credential you want to configure it. Let's say if I select the Azure AD, then you need to provide the name of your cloud credential type, subscription which you are configuring this client credential, and then the service principal details, which is your client ID and secret. For now, I'm going to leave it as is because that's something which if you want, you can do it. I'm okay with the local username and password for now. So if you click on the cluster, you can add a new cluster. So for my demonstration, I have the Kubernetes cluster created here, and that is something which we are going to import to the Rancher portal, considering this is the Kubernetes cluster which we have, which we want to basically cluster. You can import the existing cluster right from here by clicking on the import button. I'll show you in the moment, but let's say if you would like to create a new cluster or the new Kubernetes cluster, basically you can select these many number of options. You can onboard or create a cluster or the Kubernetes cluster into Amazon EC2 or Azure Kubernetes, DigitalOcean, LinkedIn, or Spare. So or you can host it with, you can click here as well. So for now we are going to use the import existing cluster option, considering we have the Kubernetes cluster already available, which has, let's say, a certain number of application running. So we want to onboard that particular cluster. Let's click on create, and then that will show you. So these are the commands which we need to run on our Kubernetes cluster to onboard the Kubernetes cluster to this Rancher portal. So for this, first of all, let's connect to the Kubernetes cluster which we have in our Azure environment. So this is my Kubernetes cluster which I have in my environment. First of all, I'm going to connect to this cluster. I will run the command. Next, I can run the kubectl command now. Kubectl get all. So these are the different services running. I can also run kubectl get namespaces, or which is ns, and these are the different namespaces. So let's run these commands and clear out everything here. I'll run the command, and you can see that we are getting this certificate related error which has been described here on this particular documentation. So if you get this error, you can run curl command. This is what we are going to do now. So on the curl command, if you get this error, no object pass to apply, make sure you are removing the dash which is at the end of the command and then re-adding it. This should resolve the issue. As you can see, this is going to successfully onboard the AKS cluster to our Rancher portal. Now if we refresh that and try to connect again, we should have a Kubernetes cluster onboarded here. So let's go to the clusters, and we can see that it's on waiting right now. This will take a moment to activate, and we can see that it's activated already. If I click here on the cluster, I should get all the details about my cluster, what is the utilization, how it looks like, what are the different events going on in the cluster, and things like that. I could go to the nodes section as well. So these are the different nodes. I just have one node Kubernetes cluster. That's why it is showing one node. If you want to see the other details like persistent volume, storage configuration, different namespaces. So these are the different namespaces. I have it in my Kubernetes cluster. So which I have just now shown you here by running the kubectl command. I'll show you again. Git ns, and you would see that these are the same namespace which we can see here on the Rancher portal. So exact replica, you can see it here. You can manage it. If you want to change it, you can add a new namespace, you can add a new cluster, you can add a new application to this particular cluster. So I can create a new project. Basically, creating a new project means that you are creating or onboarding a new Kubernetes cluster from Azure or from any other cloud provider. That's what it is. Now, if we go back again, here is the kubectl command line button, which you can use to run the kubectl command. So I can basically run the kubectl command right here on this particular UI. So you can see that it's going to connect to my project, which is my Kubernetes cluster. And if I run kubectl get namespaces, then I should have the same result which are available over there. Okay. So you don't need to go again back to the terminal. You can right here go ahead and change or run your commands here in this particular section. You can view all the details in the API section right here. Now, if you see, instead of selecting the default project or default configuration of your cluster, you can select the it's automatically selected, which is the project which we have created just now. It is in the active section right now. So if I select the default, that will show if there are any application or workload which is being running. You can import a new application to this Kubernetes cluster if you have the YAML configuration or the deployment configuration written in the YAML by clicking on this particular button. So if you click on this button, it will ask you to upload the YAML, and it will provide you the option. Do you want to upload the deployment onto a default namespace, or you want to create a new namespace? Like, you can click here on the button and then create a new namespace, import the deployment YAML into a new namespace right from this particular UI section. Okay, this is again different viewing angle to the dashboard. If you want, you can click here to deploy, which is going to give you the UI configuration which you can use. For example, let's say I would like to create a busybox container and then here I can click busybox, and then name is, let's say, PB. That's the name of the application. I can specify how many number of pods I want for this, and do I need a new namespace? Let's call it as an application namespace, and that's where which port you want to expose for this application. What are the different environment variables you want to configure? Are there any scheduling, help, or the persistent volume you want to attach to this particular application? Config map, secret, certificate, everything you can do it right here from this particular section, from the UI itself. That's a good thing about it. You don't need to worry about the kubectl command or anything like that. You can manage it right here from this particular section. Behind the scene, what it does, it basically creates the application deployment template with the Helm, with the help of Helm chart. Basically, it uses the Helm library, creates the Helm chart for your deployment, and use that particular Helm chart to deploy the application into your project or in your Kubernetes cluster. So if I click here on the launch button, so what it does, it is going to create a busybox container for me. It is going to take time, and you can see that this is the application which it's trying to create, and I have a application ready within just few seconds. It's less than a 5 second. Basically, it has successfully created the application. Now I can go to the this is the load balancer volumes, if there are any load balancer configured. If I go and if I want to see the configuration or the existing running configuration of my application, as you can see that while running the busybox container, we have specified 3 different replicas. So now we have 3 replicas of the busybox container running, and all of them are active. This is the node configuration. So you can see that everything is shown here on the UI. You don't need to worry about anything else. All right. Now, there are certain scenarios you may want to, onboard the Helm library application onto your Kubernetes cluster. So if that's the case, you can click here on the app section. So app section will provide you the different application catalogs which are available from the Helm library, which you can onboard to your Kubernetes project. Let's say if you want to onboard a WordPress application, I would like to click here on the launch button. That will show the Helm library applications which are available right here. Let's say if we can install the WordPress application very quickly from the template. So if I'm going to select a WordPress application onto the namespace, which is so as you can see that I'm just with the help of a single click, I'm able to launch the WordPress Helm library application onto my project, onto my Kubernetes cluster, and that will launch that will deploy a certain number of resources in my Kubernetes cluster. For example, a public load balancer with a public IP address, so that I can launch the WordPress application on the browser and use it as we do use it as the standalone application. And the WordPress application is successfully deployed, and now I can browse the WordPress application. So that's about the application. And let's say if we would like to upgrade to an existing application which is deployed in our cluster, let's see how simple is that. So these are so let's say this is our busybox application. We want to upgrade this application to a newer version, for example. So I can click here on these 3 dots, click edit. So that will open the terminal as is, as we have opened it for the very first time. And now here in this section, what we can do is we can upgrade the application which is already deployed. So rather than deploying it from the deployment YAML template, basically you can simply upgrade it right from this particular UI. So this is just an example of upgrading it to the existing application. And from the point of the previous application which we have deployed, for example, the WordPress application, it has deployed 2 different containers, 2 different type of containers in my cluster. One is the WordPress UI container with the help of this Docker image, and there is a MariaDB database for the WordPress which will be used. I can simply go ahead and deploy, delete, or edit the application right from the UI, or if I want to edit it from the YAML, then I can edit in the YAML as well. Let's take a look at the YAML section if you want to edit the YAML. So this is how the YAML template look like for the deployment. It's using a couple of it's just a huge template. You don't want to manage this kind of a template right here, but this is just to give you an idea that if you want to copy the YAML, you want to manage that will be YAML your own, then that is something you can do it here in the Rancher portal as well. I hope this demonstration was useful and you have learned how do you manage the Rancher portal, or how do you manage your Kubernetes cluster from the Rancher portal. At the last, I would like to tell you that Rancher is going to be really useful if you have more than one Kubernetes cluster, or the Kubernetes cluster which you have deployed across the different cloud platform, and you need a platform to manage all the different various type of Kubernetes cluster or different type of Kubernetes cluster at the single place, then that's the rancher is going to be really useful in that sort of scenario. But if I have a single Kubernetes cluster in my environment or in my subscription, in that case, you may want to continue using the legacy or the kubectl approach to manage your application, because the rancher itself or the configuration of the rancher itself requires a little bit of management or the additional resources which you need to configure. For example, you need to create a virtual machine, you need to manage the patching security of those virtual machine. On top of that, you need to install the docker on those virtual machine and the rancher image itself. Okay, so if you are happy with that, you can go ahead with the use of rancher. But if you have the single application or single Kubernetes cluster, then the rancher, managing the rancher is going to be a little bit of expensive. So it's up to your choice, how do you want to manage it. I hope this demonstration is helpful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching it. See you in the next video. Bye.